I'm very happy to be here. Well, not here, here virtually, in conversation with my friend and mentor and co-collaborator and conspirator, Reid Hoffman. Hi, Reid. Thanks for coming.
It's awesome to be here, and kudos to all the folks who kind of stay focused on these missions in these kind of chaotic times.
Yeah, I was thinking this morning, getting dressed, like you and I have known each other and worked on things together for 20 years, and I'm not sure we've ever done anything quite like this.
Nope, I think this is the first. Which I think the last couple of weeks, I think have been first for a lot of people.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. We'll have a chat and we'll see how it goes. So, well, let's just start. Let's start just on background. So, as long as you and I have known each other, you spend a lot of your time and money on mission-oriented nonprofits. The ones that are most obvious to me in terms of time are Kiva and Crisis Text Line, Mozilla, Change.org, but also being involved with Code for America and others. It's a huge, long list. Like, why have you always prioritized this kind of work?
Well, I think the primary thing to kind of sort out the meaning of a life and the meaning of life that I kind of that attracts me is how do we help humanity evolve? How do we become the better versions of ourselves, where we're more compassionate wise, where society works better, where you're more inclusive, where more opportunity, more ability to have people live kind of fulfilling lives. And so what I look for is the various kinds of points of leverage where I understand something, if not unique, at least unusual, in order to be able to help and participate. So obviously there's a bunch of areas within the technology arena, which include Kiva, trying to do essentially marketplaces for microfinance and trying to now they're doing a bunch of projects, including one they announced at the UN last year, for taking essentially crypto ledgers to creating kind of identity and digital inclusion systems. So you can have financial systems that enables people in Sierra Leone, eventually all of Africa, maybe other places. And it ranges from that to like entrepreneurship, which can be Endeavor or can be the Center for Rural Innovation, which is trying to figure out how to do rural stuff, mostly here in the US, to occasionally just the really strange technology stuff like OpenAI or other kinds of things where you go, okay, why is that part of the philanthropy thing? And the answer is, well, if this technology is going to move the world, let's try to make sure that technology is available to a wide set of players in order to deploy it in ways that are positive for humanity. And so it's a combination of technology, a combination of entrepreneurship, a combination of kind of the practice that you and I do as venture capitalists, and kind of applying that to this arena, which is not exact parallel apples and apples, but it's not apples and potatoes.
Well, we'll talk about some of that and some of the lessons you apply from venture capital in a few minutes. But I mean, maybe at a very basic level, how do you decide which projects to get involved in?
Well, it's kind of a question of impact. So impact in a kind of a simple variable is a number of people you help or kind of facilitate and empower or enable in some way. The depth of that impact. So is it a small impact? Is it a deep impact? Times time, right? Because obviously if you do a slice every day or every week and you got something that goes for decades, that actually has a kind of a huge impact. And so what are the variables that enable that? Well, some obvious variables, especially for people attending this conference, are technology, but also good variables are actually, in fact, do you have a good business model with it? Or do you have some way that the compound thing can work way? And so those things kind of bring my the kind of the experiences that you and I've had over 20 plus years and kind of doing this career and then applying them to this kind of depth of impact. And so it comes out in kind of the same way that I look at or very similar way to the way I look at companies, which is, do you have a leader like Nancy Loveland, speaking about Crisis Text Line, who says, look, I have this idea about something that would be really, really key to the world, which is teens participate by text and mobile phone versus call-in numbers, and the ability to deal with questions like that could impact their lives, could affect diverting a suicide and saving a life, could kind of as opposed to crushing you, have you navigate through your problem and being available, applying, AI, kind of group tech, other kinds of things, facilitating volunteers through a set of software tools, and I can pull that whole ecosystem together. And I go, well, it's a leader. There's a need in the market, need in the time, and the plan works, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you get those three things, you go, okay, just like an investment, this is the thing to invest in and buy and help come into existence. Now, the other thing that I also, in this whole thing add in is that most big projects, most interesting projects involve risk, because you can't guarantee that the thing's going to happen. Can't guarantee product market fit. There's all kinds of uncertainties. Can you pull the tech together? What does later financing look like? What does the play within the marketplace look like? And so I also tend to orient towards the ones that are a risk judgment to making something happen, because it's, again, where most people, and especially in philanthropy and tech, they go, I want certainty. I want to know, I put in $1 and I get this thing out. And you're like, well, but actually, in fact, some of the really big and interesting tech projects don't work that way. They don't work that way in the commercial realm. They don't work that way in the philanthropic realm. And so you have to be able to take that jump off a cliff and make it work. And so, I also orient towards those projects because that ability to do a differential risk assessment is one of the things that I hopefully bring, a skill or two to the table.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you listen to you talk, it seems like you're saying, like, you are willing to take risk because that's can solve the biggest problems, and then you want to have a great leader, a great mission, something that compounds, and then a business model that works. But it seems to me like the one that you're willing to negotiate on is the business model that works, because the leaders often can do that. But can you tell me about what I want to ask? Two questions. One is that what is it about the leader in particular that gets you excited? Then the second is talk more about what compounding means.
So in terms of leader, what you're looking for is, and it's very similar to, the exact kind of thing that we invest in as entrepreneurs, which is a person who has a vision and is persistent, grit, is going to focus on it, but is also flexible and is learning, because they realize that actually adapting what they're doing to the circumstances of the marketplace, to what's going on, is exactly the kind of thing in order to succeed. Like, very much the organizers of this conference going, oh gosh, our conference has been nuked by COVID. Hey, wait, we could do online. We can pull this off. Let's pull it together. Let's make it happen. Yeah. And so you want that central characteristic. You want an ability to be what I call an infinite learner, because as part of that flexibility and learning, there's when you're creating these new things, there's all these new things you're learning. You're learning maybe technology. You're learning maybe scale management, organization. You're learning funding, financing. You're learning business models. I mean, it's just all over the place, and that's part of the reason why there's risk and so many different areas to fail. So that learning. The next thing is its ability to assemble team and people, yep. Because it's not a solo game; it's a team sport, and the ability to bring people with passion and commitment who, ideally, kind of like the standard is like people that you would work for, the people that, would be like are amazing and that you learn from as you work with them. And so that set of things. And then there's a couple of baseline things you have to be really, in all entrepreneurial projects, like, can a person fundraise well? By the way, the same thing is true on the commercial side as the nonprofit side. Maybe the nonprofit side, because the business models aren't as readily available, it's even a little bit more key to be able to do that successfully. But those are the set of things that you're looking for, and I guess sometimes in some areas, just like other things, there's some baseline skills that would be important. Like if you're going to do a deep tech thing, then you have to have some cognizance of the technology. If you're going to do a market specific thing, you have to have some knowledge of what that market will need. Like frequently in the nonprofit world, it's, do you have the respect and participation of the folks in the community, the credibility that people say, okay, we trust you, that you're going to be a good participant and facilitator of the things that are going to happen. So that's kind of the people side, and then the compounding side. Basically, where that like that earlier three, X times Y times Z, number of people, depth of impact, time. The way that really gets to scale is when it really compounds, over time. And compounding is like, for example, if something grows, well, PayPal, in the early days was growing at 2 to 5% per day. That, yes, exactly. You look at the exponential math, and within a month, you're just like, the tsunami has come well over your head. It's like that classic, like 1 penny, 2 pennies, 4 pennies. Like, oh, it's pennies. Oh, pretty soon it's, more atoms in the universe. And so what you're looking for is, what are the set of mechanisms that can really get that compounding to work? It's one of the reasons why technology in philanthropy is so important, because usually technology is one of the things that really can unlock the compounding. Like the stuff you guys are doing at Code for America. Say, look, we enable the following way to get food assistance to work, and then all of a sudden, once we've done it, we can get a lot of people going through what is otherwise a huge fall off on food assistance, because it's not conditioned on your knowledge of bad tech design as to whether or not you need food. It's like, okay, here is the way that you can qualify for it. Or in the cases where usually disadvantaged minorities and so forth can't clear their records effectively because it's made arcane, make it easy. And then once you build the tech, then it's available for everyone. Right. And then you can learn from it. And then the learning curve in the tech side means that you can improve it in a way that improves at a faster than linear characteristic, and a faster than, one person does their hand of their coding or the measurement of how the UI works. And then that scales to a large number of other people. And so those are the kinds of things that get really interesting and exciting when you're, helping the entrepreneurs, helping the CEOs, helping the founders realize these visions of a better society.
Yep. Yeah, we spent a lot of time at Code for America talking about sort of the spectrum between full-on productization, like an Instagram product, versus consulting services. And, obviously you can make an immediate impact today with consulting, whereas the product stuff is really the stuff that scales and compounds over time, as you say.
Yep.
There was a kind of a question in the chat, which was, how do founders convince you to take the risk along with them? Like, is there something about, how do they show grit, or how do they show grit plus mission? Is it showing you a product, showing you impact already? How do they do it for you?
So first is the kind of classic is that part of the way that I operationalized is through referrals. So, even amazing superstars like Nancy, you, other people, I meet everybody by referral, right? So it was Sean White, right?
Yeah.
Nancy, it was Jason Diaz. I mean, it's just the stacks of folks. So you get a bunch of information there. Second thing is, what have they been doing? So the kind of, and this goes to Nancy's prior gig, do something. You can always do something. So you can actually, in fact, make progress. You can pull stuff together. You can go meet people. You can get intelligence about what you're doing. Part of the demonstration is, I'm in motion. I'm doing stuff already. I'm making it happen. I have tackled hard problems, usually hard problems, and have won sometimes. Great. How and what? And have lost sometimes. Okay. How and what? What did you learn? Et cetera. And so that's the kind of things. And then the question comes down to, in this specific idea, do I think it has a good chance to win? Which, I might be, or a reasonable chance, the right risk-adjusted bet, and I might be right or wrong. But that set of it, and then also, is it the right fit for me? Right? Like, is the kind of thing that actually, in fact, I am a good talent and resource and network to help with this. And I guess that brings the last thing, which is, again, none of these things are solo missions, and so part of the thing is always be building your network around you, always be building. And it isn't just employees, it isn't just investors. It's also experts. It's also, people who have resources, access to networks and other things. So it's like, and you're doing that as well. And so those kinds of things are the kinds of things that kind of go into the set of things. But just like all investing, it's a combination of art and science. So some of it also comes out as, well, I think so, although we try to train our intuitions.
Yep, that all makes sense to me. Let me shift gears a little bit to something that's like a little topical. So how do you think the philanthropic environment is changing now? So are there more people like you who are willing to take risk and venture investments? And then I'll ask a very specific question after that. What's your sense of how it's moving around?
My sense is it's slowly improving. It's not improving as fast as you think it might, given the general explosion of technology, given the general, kind of number of folks who are realizing that you can move from a garage to building a really interesting company of scale. But it is growing because of that, but it is not kind of growing at the same rate. And I think part of that's because a lot of times when people go and start company X, they kind of think, well, philanthropy is starting the tech company. It's actually not doing the 501c3, other things. And they think that that's because, that has a business model and it compounds and it's the thing they understand. So they're going to put their money into it. And, part of the reason I think events like this are important and other kinds of things say, no, actually, in fact, you need to think about these other areas too, because there are a number of critical things for the elevation of humanity that aren't simple, like buy this product or service. They're like for example, classically in a lot of health and medical stuff, because I think if I anticipate where you're likely going, if you follow the pure, kind of profit incentive model, you say, well, what we want to do is have everyone have a lot of chronic diseases and then be having them pay us month by month to solve the chronic disease. And you're like, that's a bad outcome. Right? But that's not the way we want. We want to prevent it. We want it to go away. We want to cure it. Right. And so
you heard it here first. Reid Hoffman says, do not create more chronic diseases.
Yes, exactly.
For profit.
So how do you, so what are the things that you do in order to do that? And that is part of the reason why I think that more or less anyone who thinks of themselves as a participant for the good should not just, I think it's a good thing to do companies. It's great. I mean, there's lots of value to that. Products and services people want, jobs, participation in the economy, participation, making wealth, creates healthcare and education, ability to potentially even contribute to climate change. Other things are really important. But you need to focus on these other things that are actually, in fact, outside the main market. And how do you participate in those too? And how do you bring technology to that?
Okay, so we only have 5 minutes left. I want to go back to a question that I missed in the chat, which is this: you get a lot of your introductions to your investments through referrals. How do you broaden your networks? So how do you make sure that it encourages diversity, people of color, women, et cetera?
Well, so I do as best I can. It is a common thing that I ask people for, is to say, hey, are there anyone that I should know or help that you've met that is in the underrepresented groups? And it's one of the reasons why, like when we fired up Masters of Scale, we said, well, half of our guests are going to be women, because there are a lot of amazing women entrepreneurs. They just aren't. Only a few of them hit the spotlight regularly, and so let's get the spotlight on some others as well. I think but the short answer is you work it. You do work. You make it happen. And so, also as John, like, we do things at the firm, like women entrepreneur office hours at TechCrunch event and other kinds of things. Like you say, you basically, the short answer is you just keep putting your hand and your fingers on the scale to try to get it to even out better, right? In terms of how you're doing it. It doesn't mean you throw the doors open, but it does mean that you work that particular angle.
Yeah, I think we learned some of this from the work Megan Smith did at Google, where she was just trying to highlight the stories of women in computing and science all along. She did a really good service, and she continues to do that.
Yep. And she's great on her Masters of Scale episode too on that, by the way.
Yeah, I find many of the women on Master of the Scale are your
Yep.
best
Yeah.
interviews anyhow. They have a lot to
Yeah.
say, and not to contribute. So the last question I think I have, depending, is so with COVID-19, so life's changing, and so if I'm a entrepreneur and I've got a social mission, a nonprofit, how do I think about the funding environment? Like is it a 90-day dislocation? Is it a 2-year dislocation? Is it how should I think about how funders' outlooks will change? I mean, what should I be thinking about, and how should I prepare?
So I think what you'll see is that for, call it 6 months, people will put the variety, like will orient a lot of their money towards COVID things, whether it's, and hopefully they'll think broadly. They won't just go, look, it's really important to do the science stuff. It's really important to do the tech stuff. Those are super important to do, but also local food banks, other kinds of things, because, by the way, health is making sure that the kids and the families and everything else are fed. Um, and so, like, I think there'll be a huge orientation towards, oh, we need to do this. There's a lot of suffering. Obviously, there's going to be a tremendous amount of people in the workforce who are, working in retail and other outlets. Small businesses are going to suddenly be added to the mix. And so I think there's going to be a natural intent to fix that. So if you're in it and can help with it, I think that's a very good thing to do. I think it's a good add-in. I think there will be a kind of a 6 months of focus. And then I think slowly it'll trickle back to slowly, moderately, but fast, it'll trickle back to the other things. So if you're outside of that, then I think that the answer, somewhat like companies, is to batten down the hatches, right? Like to be careful about expenses, to realize that you're probably like, it's going to be extra. It's going to be harder to raise the same amount of money, and slower as part of it. And so be really careful about how you're doing that, because it isn't that people don't care. It's that there's always a limited budget, and part of the limited budget is going to be, what do we do for this, pandemic that's kind of hit across, society, and it caused a huge amount of dislocation. And so I think that's those are the two things that I would look at there.
Yeah, so I mean, to reframe, it seems like what you're saying is that if you're running an organization now and there's stuff you can do to help the current problems, try to be as aggressive and specific as you can in those. Other than that, try to keep your burn as manageable as you can. Try to manage all your finances and assume this will be longer than you think and less money than you think to raise. And after 9/11, I mean, most people on the broadcast won't remember this because they're younger than we are. But after 9/11, like the funding environment changed for years, for 2 years, 3 years. How long do you think this will be?
So we don't know yet, and you should definitely have at least the thinking about what happens if it's 2 or 3 years, right? Like, if you are not asking the question and have some monitoring and measuring, I think that's possible. Now, 9/11 was a combination of the internet winter and then 9/11 and then, a stack of other things, whereas 2008 was like, 4 to 6 months, right? So, and the part of it is also, societies that back then, I'm not quite sure about the current administration, have gotten smarter about how to patch this stuff and what kind of things to do. And so, maybe you can get through. Maybe it won't be 2 to 3 years, but I would say part of what we're doing is kind of like, okay, immediately start controlling expenses, start expecting difficulty, and then be measuring and monitoring, right? And our hope is that by, roughly speaking, the fall and going into next year, we will gotten back to kind of more kind of normalcy and growth and being able to help. But, there's there's a lot of unknowns between here and there.
Yeah, well, the administration being smarter is what we're counting on. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I put my marker on that, but
decidedly not.
All right. Well, on that super optimistic note, thanks for spending time with us, and thanks to the Fast Forward folks for putting on a conference in very difficult circumstances. So I appreciate everybody involved.
And thanks for everyone for in these chaotic times, staying focused on what is this, like what do we do to accelerate good, and we're going to spend our time to come and do this. So thanks everyone for coming.
Yes, sir.